Hi everybody, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player that gets a little too comfortable with his Dungeons & Dragons group and offers up his wife and other things to the party. A story about a player couple that want to make D&D all about them, and much more. But before we get into those, let's meditate with Simba to help boost our protection against the psychic damage that these stories are sure to inflict. Thanks, Simba. Now I think we are ready for some D&D horror stories. Player offers to have his wife do favors in the middle of the game, by Reddit user Uzumaki420. A while back, I, a male, reconnected with an old work buddy, female fighter, and we started doing game night with her husband, male ranger, and other friend, male warlock. We decided to take up Dungeons & Dragons after discussing it and finding that we were all very enthusiastic about the idea. Unfortunately, I was the only one of the group who had played D&D before, and it was only for a few sessions with a group that quickly fell apart due to scheduling issues. The issue was, who would be the dungeon master? None of them were comfortable with it since they were completely new, and I suffer from crippling social anxiety and agoraphobia, so I was not comfortable taking the reins. I reluctantly told them that I had a friend, referred to hereafter as BK for Buzzkill, who might be willing to DM for us. BK was someone I had known since high school. He was someone who I really only liked in small doses because his personality could be a bit much. So when we needed a DM, I warned the group that BK was not particularly reliable, and that he had a habit of saying wildly inappropriate or just flat out gross things from time to time. However, the group jumped on the chance to have a somewhat experienced dungeon master. BK agreed to DM for us and seemed enthusiastic. However, after 4 months, we had only had 2 game sessions and a session 0. On the 3rd session, BK showed up drunk and high. It quickly became obvious that he had nothing prepared, and he just talked in circles for an hour while we sat there awkwardly, waiting for a chance to interact with the world. Eventually, he more or less said, "F it, the campaign is over. We will start a new one next session." Needless to say, we were displeased with the incident, so I reluctantly and nervously decided to offer to be the DM instead. They were surprised at my willingness to take the driver's seat, given my mental health concerns, but they were all very encouraging. So, I talked to BK and told him I had decided to try being the DM, choosing not to say that it was because of the way he ran the table. He still wanted to be a player, and we all thought it would be okay since we could do sessions without him if he didn't show up. So, for my first campaign, I ran Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, and it went surprisingly well. As it turns out, I have a knack for DMing. BK took part in sessions here and there as we moved on to Dragon of Icespire Peak. He occasionally went on drunken rants about he and his wife being swingers, but we chose to ignore these comments. At one point, he started making inappropriate comments to Fighter, in front of her husband, no less. Man, talk about ballsy. But I guess enough liquid courage can make you do just about anything. Fortunately, Fighter is military in real life, and she shut him down with a look that would make even the bravest of men run for their lives. Later, the next day, I texted Fighter to ask if she would like me to tell BK not to come back. She was appreciative, but chose to forgive, saying that she has done worse things while drunk. Anyway, BK was only showing up to 1 out of every 3 sessions, so hopefully he would just stop showing up altogether and we could avoid confrontation. So fast forward to BK's last session. Over the course of the session, he was getting progressively more drunk. I swear to God, this next part came completely out of the blue. BK pulled out a crack pipe and started asking who wanted to join him. Holy crap, I thought he was ballsy before, but that takes the cake. I'm usually a very passive person, but I shut that crap down straight away and told him very sternly that he was not going to smoke crack in my apartment. I knew he had taken a lot of pills in his college years, but I was unaware that he had started on crack. He looked a little embarrassed, but put the pipe away. Honestly, that there should have been enough to boot him from the game and OP's apartment, but we got a little bit of story left. Not even 5 minutes later, BK once again interrupts combat, and again, out of the blue, he says, "If you guys want to make this really fun, I can call my wife over to play Hungry Hungry Hippos under the table for us." Why would his wife want to play Hungry Hungry Oh no. We all sat in stunned silence for a minute. Finally, Warlock speaks up and says, "I have a better idea. All in favor of BK going home now." Immediately, all our hands shot into the air. BK looked at us like we were being unreasonable and said, "Fine, if you all don't want to have a good time. I was just trying to spice the game up a little." To my relief, he packed up his things and left on the spot. I have not talked to him since. We all breathed a sigh of relief and collectively agreed that we probably should have done that sooner. Yeah, I'd say at the moment he pulled out the crack pipe, but that's just me. I still feel bad that I was the one who essentially brought him into the group in the first place. However, the rest of the group reminded me that I had warned them about him before I invited him, so no harm done. Several months later, our group is still going strong, and I'm still running sessions for the group. I find that putting quests and adventures together helps me with my mental health even. As for BK, I hope he gets help for his obvious alcoholism and apparently budding crack addiction. Man, BK certainly sounded like a roller coaster of a person. First, just getting so drunk that he ups and ends a campaign out of the blue 3 sessions in. Then, as a player, offering up his wife to do sexual favors, to blatantly bringing out a crack pipe, assuming that everyone would be okay with that. I do say that the group kicking him was the right choice, and I'm glad to hear that OP has come into their own as a dungeon master, and is still running games for his group. Like OP said, hopefully, BK will get the help that he obviously needs. But something tells me that his wife is likely also into all that stuff. And when you have a relationship built around that, he's unlikely to give that stuff up without leaving his wife as well. I will pray for him though. Let's move on to the next post. Rogues leave the game after realizing that actions have consequences. By Reddit user AstroFlare. Our dungeon master is running a guild setting. Think Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where there's a quest board that has various missions, assembling a team, all that jazz. It's mainly so she, the dungeon master, can have lots of players and cycle them in and out as needed in case of scheduling conflicts, unexpected circumstances causing someone to miss a session, etc. Enter Rogue 1 and Rogue 2. Rogues 1 and 2 were an in-real-life boyfriend-girlfriend that rolled up in Aarakocra and Tabaxi respectively, because Rogue 1 wanted to min-max and Rogue 2 wanted to be an anime catgirl. The group selects a quest from the board, which is a request to investigate people going missing around a particular section of woods. The party heads out and stops at the nearby town to ask questions about the disappearances. Rogues 1 and 2 decide to use this moment to peel off from the group and do their own thing, without mentioning what they were doing or where they were going to anyone. They tell the dungeon master that they want to head into the Noble District and find a house to loot, while the party is waiting for them to get back. Dungeon Master lets them have one, and through a series of decent rolls, allows them to pilfer a currently empty house for some gold and jewelry. The party is still waiting, naturally assuming that once they finish, they'll join back up. But they do not. Rogues 1 and 2 both want to loot another house, so the party decides to move on, heading into the woods without them, because it looks like they weren't coming back. They eventually find the reason that people were going missing, a cannibal that was hanging out in the woods, and decide to initiate combat. Meanwhile, Rogues 1 and 2 keep insisting that they want to loot more houses, and the Dungeon Master lets them roll for another house. This one is occupied by one guy. Rogues 1 and 2 jump him, and after a short scuffle, end up killing him. Keep in mind, this guy was a noble, and both rogues were aware of this, since they were looting in the noble district. They loot the second house, and the Dungeon Master has them roll stealth as they leave to wait for the party to return. Both of them roll under 10, so they head back into town to wait for the party to return, and get arrested by guards about an hour later as people saw Tabaxi and Aarakocra leave a now dead noble's house, and their pockets were full of valuables. The party is currently getting their asses kicked by the cannibal, but the Moon Druid was able to pounce him as a tiger, while the rest of the party beat him into the dirt, so they ended up with a win. They returned to town to also get questioned by the guards, because Rogues 1 and 2 mentioned that they were guild members as they were getting arrested. The party isn't getting involved with their crap, and tells the guards that they were investigating the disappearances when Rogues 1 and 2 ghosted them without saying where they were going. The guards believed them because they had brought the cannibal's body as proof of their mission completion. Rogue 1, however, is bitching non-stop about getting caught, saying that it's BS that there was no opposing roll to see them. The passive perception of most people is at least a 10. Never mind your average city guard, which is around 12 to 14. Not to mention the neighbors hearing sounds of a struggle because they were fighting him in his own home, and he was trying to find any excuse to avoid being punished. He eventually starts yelling to the point that the Dungeon Master tells him, "If you're gonna yell at me in my own game, you can get the F out." Rogue 1 bitches more, but backs off. The session ends with the party cleared to return, while Rogues 1 and 2 remain in jail. The Dungeon Master tells them, after the session, that they can either try to convince the guild to help legally bail them out next session, but face negative stigma on future missions for a while, or roll up new characters to avoid the hassle. Rogues 1 and 2 say something about rolling up new characters, but the very next day, they make an announcement that they're dropping out. TLDR. Two rogues ignore party quest and decide to loot houses instead. Dungeon Master gives them one for free, but they insist on looting more instead of doing the quest, and end up getting caught. Rogue bitches, and eventually, both of them leave the game. It sounds to me like this couple wanted the game to be all about them. I mean, why else would they decide to not stick with the party and just go burgle some houses, while the rest of the players actually went and did the quest? Then, for Rogue 1 to get all bitchy when he and his girlfriend's characters got caught shows the maturity level of at least him. Their getting caught does make sense, and in a game like Dungeons & Dragons, actions have consequences. And as far as the couple dropping out of the game completely, I think it was because they saw that the Dungeon Master would not cater to them and treat every player equally. At least, that's how I see it. On to the next post. Friend completely ruined Session 0 for every player in terrible ways. By Reddit user, The Pagan Raven Goddess. To kick this off, let me preface this by saying the now ex-friend, who I'm gonna call JC, was a very bedroom-driven person, if you catch my drift. Also keep in mind, this is Session 0 for my husband, call him Alex. our close friend, Ryan, and I. JC had played before with some of their other friends, although this was their first time being a dungeon master. And Ryan had played several times before, but this was his first time playing with us. We sit down at the table, get everything ready, all of us super excited to play our characters, and the first thing out of JC's mouth is, "Okay, who's in a relationship with who?" In the back of my head, I'm already predicting how this is gonna go, but I tell them, "It's obvious, Alex and I are together. I mean, we are married in reality." And immediately, JC huffs and says, "Well, that's not gonna work. Session 0 is supposed to be about how everyone meets everyone else. As Dungeon Master, I'm gonna say you two have to meet at a tavern." We all groan, as we know that this is not gonna go well. Things start off by Alex's character walking into the tavern and hitting on my character, who is apparently, quote, "drunker than a skunk," according to JC. The next 20 minutes was JC describing in detail, like down to how, quote, endowed Alex's character was, how Alex and I's characters stumble up to a tavern's room and break the bed and all the furniture while doing things. I finally stop JC and tell them this isn't how my character is. She's shy and reserved and gentle, despite being a big beast. She's not someone you find on the corner offering services. And Alex pops off as well. "Yeah, I'm not comfortable with you trying to describe every little detail about our escapades and bedroom activities." JC was furious. "Well, fine. I was just trying to explain how you two met and fell in love. What do you suggest then? We skip this and move on to the next day?" Alex, Ryan, and I look at each other before saying, in unison, "Yes, please." JC huffs and walks away from the table to get a beer, and the three of us give each other the look of, "Are we sure we want to continue?" before Ryan responded out loud, "Why not? Surely it can't get any worse, right?" JC returns, and we move on to the next day. Alex and I's characters decide to go to the market so we could stock up on supplies before leaving on an adventure. This is where Ryan's character is met. It was apparent that JC didn't bother to read character sheets or backgrounds, because they introduce Ryan's character as you two are browsing the fresh foods, you then overhear a commotion between two people and look up to see Ryan's character starting a physical fight with his brothers. Immediately, Ryan stops JC. "Stop right there. My character doesn't have any brothers, let alone any family willing to talk to him. Did you even read my character sheet?" JC huffs again. "Yeah, obviously. But how else am I going to introduce your character?" Maybe by bumping into Raven's character, or Alex's character," Ryan responds. JC glares at Ryan before saying, "Fine, Ryan, your character accidentally bumps into Raven's character, knocking the basket out of their hand." Finally, some normality. The story goes on with our three characters agreeing to travel together. However, JC, now clearly irritated and directing their anger towards Ryan, keeps trying to get Ryan out of the picture. "Ryan's character, you decide that you need one last thing from the market and dash off in the direction of it." JC looks at us, waiting for a response. I sigh. "Hey, Alex's character, let's wait up for Ryan's character until he gets back." And I tell JC that we're stopping at the job board to wait for Ryan's character. JC's eye literally twitches as they reluctantly agree. However, the agreement did not last long. As Ryan is in the middle of explaining that he is on his way back to the group, JC interrupts him. "Okay, anyway, Raven's character, Alex's character. You two decide to move on and leave Ryan's character in the town, as he will only slow you down." JC shoots Ryan a devilish grin from across the table. I finally snap and say, "Actually, I'm gonna roll an inspection check to look at these jobs on the board. Maybe there's something for the three of us to do. I then grab my d20 dice. I roll, and it hilariously lands on a 19. I then say, I start flipping through the jobs and discover a rather large newspaper article about someone needing help locating a murderer. It takes me forever to read, long enough for Ryan's character to catch up and offer me a drink of water and thanks for waiting for him. I then look up at Ryan to see the relief and thankfulness in his eyes. JC furiously scoots the chair back and stands up, saying, Fine, whatever. If you want to be in charge of everything, why don't you be the DM? This session is over. Completed. That's how you guys meet. And they storm off to the kitchen. The three of us look at each other and shrug before cleaning up the table. And afterwards, we all agree in a private discussion that we're just going to clear our sheets, reset any XP, and pretend that this didn't happen. We were so discouraged from playing. Heck, Alex and I still haven't picked it back up because we're so cautious of people. Plus, life got in the way. Out of all that session, we're honestly disgusted by how in detail JC wanted to get with Alex and I's characters. Like, it bothered me enough to want to change the way my character dresses altogether, and that's something I thought wouldn't happen with my character. TLDR. Ex-friend of mine completely ignored our character sheets and decided to bend our characters to their liking, then tried to go into disturbing detail about my husband and I's characters' bedroom activities. After we stopped them, they tried to exclude our friend and their character completely from the game, all because said friend was unhappy with how ex-friend was treating his character. Ultimately, we all stopped playing for a while because we got discouraged as heck. Well, that certainly was a Session 0, in a way that Session 0s are not meant to be played. Like OP said, it was clear that JC didn't read any of their character sheets by the way he wanted to introduce their characters, and once called out on this, actively tried to exclude another player by just taking total control over all the characters from the players, to the point that OP had to basically DM themselves back in control. JC's reaction to that, and saying that someone else should DM, is basically what happened there. And honestly, I agree. Someone else should DM the game, because it is clear that JC is not up to the task. If I'm being honest, this whole story is just so childish that I don't really have much more to say on it, other than I hope OP and the rest of the players eventually get to play a game where they are actually in control of their characters. Now, this next story is actually one I covered in the last video, where a player was being a major creep to another female player that was going through some tough times, but this time from the viewpoint of the actual victim of said story. And things, as it turns out, were much worse than we were presented with in that story. So let's get into it. Bard player with no boundaries can't take no for an answer. Different POV. By Reddit user Isabella Silver. I happened upon a story here, which was posted by my game master. I thought I might share it from my perspective too, since the reality of the situation was a bit different than what was presented, and because I'm trying to put into words how this all looked from my perspective. I am sending this to the game master myself as well, but Rule 5 doesn't allow me to link to it, I think. I'm also stuck in a hotel room with nothing to do until tomorrow, so might as well. A really good friend of mine set up a game that I could join. I made an old elven phantom rogue for some edgy flavor to fit my rather poor state of mind. We were 4 players, but the only one that really matters to the story is the human eloquence bard, a pretty stereotypical bard whose player could never remember what his features or spells did. That is, he hits on everybody and forgets that he has features that help him do this. The other 2 were a fighter and a sorcerer. The game was a little rocky at first. Too many slightly clashing character ideas made it take a bit to really settle in, complicated by two very vocal players between the bard and the sorcerer, and the bard acting like it was really important to get a girlfriend, which he got a pretty definitive no to from both me and the sorcerer. But once that little hurdle had been overcome, we quickly found our rhythm, and then it was really fun. It helped that we all meshed well as players, wanting the same style of game, and the Game Master is incredible at storytelling and setting up good ways to push us in the right direction. Before I continue, I have to explain a little detail, which will be relevant shortly. I've been through some rough periods. 2 years ago, I came home to my fiancé dead on the floor. It's been very, very up and down since, and I'm just coming out of the worst down in my life since after he died. I had sorta implemented this a little bit into my character, flavoring the phantom feature of a ghostly presence that shares its knowledge with you as an old partner sticking around and providing help. It was a coping technique, but it felt good to me. It made it very easy for me to get deep into the character and spend hours thinking about the game and the story, and it helped my mood. Man, that does sound like quite the rough go of things. I can kind of empathize with OP here, as I am currently kinda going through the worst time of my life too. I kinda use getting lost in my work to help get my mind off things, so I can understand OP using their character as a sort of coping mechanism. Trust me, everyone deals with the bad stuff differently. A few bits of my character's background had come to light, and the bard player had an idea. He pulled me into the kitchen and proposed a few things. The TLDR is that my character's dead partner was actually his character before he got reincarnated into this bard. I didn't like his ideas. I explained that I would never want to have any romance stuff going on with the people here, neither in nor out of game. He wasn't very happy with that response, but we got interrupted when someone tried to enter the kitchen that we were talking in. Bard guy had locked the door because he wanted this to be a secret. This didn't really seem off to me at the time. We, or mostly the bard, got chewed out for locking the door, and the bard player soured a bit after this, letting it spill into the role-playing too for the rest of the session. By this point in time, I had no real problem with him. Yet. Game Master and his wife asked if everything was fine, and I told them more or less the same, that we had a chat about the game, all is good. Right after this session, Bard texted me on Discord. It was very aggressive, bitter and angry. He blamed me for ruining the rest of that session with a few quote-unquote threats of him leaving the group, and a few slightly weirdly generalizing comments about women. It was a few big walls of text, which I didn't really know what to respond to, so I ended up responding with a short, maybe a bit rude, "Sorry, I'm not in a great spot at the moment. I hope we can still play as normal, because you have still been fun to play with, but I need to keep this at arm's length." This message was clearly not good enough for him, and he got a bit angry and questioned me about meeting outside of the group. I only gave a small, "No, sorry." I was busy and not feeling up for any social interactions with what was still a stranger to me, especially not since he seemed rather angry. He sent a few more messages, which I didn't read, and has since been deleted, unfortunately. And I have a feeling I'm happy that I didn't read them. We are definitely getting a clearer picture of Bard with the story, more so than the other story I read in the previous video. He's definitely showing that he has anger issues and likes to aim blame to others. And the fact that he wanted to meet OP outside of the game in this state is a huge red flag. Last session, I arrived a bit late and didn't get much of a chance to talk to neither the Bard player nor the Game Master before we started. The session went very poorly. We were visiting a festival, and the Bard took that as a chance to get his character drunk and used it as an excuse to act very indecent towards everybody, especially me and the sorcerer. It was not fun to be a part of. He got told off again, but kept being weird, culminating in, quote, his character laying a hand in my character's lap, which he acted out in real life. Whoa, huge frickin' red flag there. Touching someone without consent, especially in that area, is a big no-no. He didn't get a chance to say what he wanted to say, because I interrupted him with a quick shove and a harsh "don't touch me," which was decidedly not in character. But I cannot stand physical contact. The Game Master didn't notice this, I think, and the Bard quickly turned it towards the Sorcerer, who he picked a fight with in-game and lost, before he calmed down a bit. It made the following half an hour of the game feel very tense, at least for me. I went into the kitchen to get a cup of tea to clear my head, where I got a chance to talk a bit to the fighter player about the Bard. I told him a bit about what was going on, asked if it was normal, and if I could get him to talk to his friend. He was very defensive towards the Bard player, so I just gave up. I spent a bit longer finishing the tea, strongly considering just sitting out the rest of the session, before the Bard entered the kitchen, closing and locking the door behind him. Yeah, that's not foreboding at all. He was quiet for a bit before he asked if I had read his messages. I gave him a short no, and he gave me a short, out of nowhere, spiel about not needing to feel faithful to a dead man, followed by a question about how I would surely, quote, miss sex a little bit by now. Now, I know I said this in the other story, but what the fuck? To which I only responded that none of those things concerned me. This made him approach me in a very strange and uncomfortable manner, getting way too close for comfort. He said, quote, what if it makes someone else happy? Would I need to leave this group first to fit your, quote, no dating in the group policy of yours? I will refer to my previous statement. I could really not deal with this line of questioning anymore. I simply ignored him, turned around, and finished my cup of tea. Since he was effectively trapping me, I just walked into his arm, letting him decide if he really wanted to keep me detained in there or not. But he just let me pass and asked me, why are you so cold? To which I could only respond with a, I do not like you. We then heard the Game Master's wife knock on the door, asking why the door was closed again. I unlocked the door and quickly went by the wife, who just went into the kitchen towards the Bard player. I left to go get some respite in the bathroom for a bit. I only came out when I heard the Game Master come back too. Game Master was not happy, and aggressively yelled at the Bard for having locked the kitchen door, and yelling about, what the hell happened out there? Bard was looking at me with a very angry and threatening look, giving me another question. If your husband is dead, and you don't care if you die, why deny another guy some happiness? I know I said this in the other video, but this dude isn't right in the head to ask that question, let alone in front of all the other players. I mean, seriously, what the heck? Before I could even think to answer, the yelling really began. Game Master started yelling. Bard yelled back. Sorcerer joined the yelling. I had hoped to talk it out, but I could not under those circumstances. I could barely focus on what anybody was saying, so I quickly just swept my stuff into my bag and left. Game Master's wife followed me to the car and helped me calm down enough to let the worst of it pass. She didn't ask about what had happened, but just quietly helped me calm down. I got 2 more messages from the Bard player after this. The first one was another request to, quote, meet privately to talk it out, asking for my address. I ignored him as I talked a bit with the Game Master about the situation, which made Bard send another message. This one was a bit more concerning. I get it now. You really don't care, right? Not at all. That's great. I hope you can keep having that mentality no matter what happens. See you soon. And that is a blatant threat, and grounds for calling the authorities. Bard is clearly unstable. I asked the Game Master a bit more directly about what happens now with the group, and by then, it turned out the Game Master had already resolved to kick the Bard and the fighter player, and had informed them of this hours earlier, and told the Bard at the end of the last session that he was no longer welcome. So the quote, "see you soon," feels a little ominous. We will apparently continue this weekend, if I'm up for it, after my small hospital-related trip, just with the Game Master's wife as a player, so we are still 3 players, and the Game Master and his wife will help keep an eye out for the Bard, in case he shows up anyway. I am also going to have to file a report on the Bard. I know that if he actually tries anything, a report on this threat will matter, but hopefully, he was just being creepy. That is going beyond creepy. Like I said, that last message was a veiled threat, and it is good that OP is going to file a report on this scumbag. Not a fun experience, but at least I felt that it was well handled by the parties involved, aside from the yelling and screaming. I really wish people would stop doing that. Well, that version of the story certainly did shed more light on the events than the one in my last video did. In this version, we found out that Bard was messaging OP in private with creepy propositions to meet in person outside of the game, which is a big nope. Then, he had the balls to put his hand on OP's lap during the game. It's a good thing for Bard that the DM didn't see that part. Otherwise, he may have left with more than just a sore ego. Then, to essentially trap OP in the kitchen again with that line of questioning and propositioning her for sex shows that Bard has no empathy, or in simpler terms, is a psychopath. It's good that the Dungeon Master kicked him and the person that brought him to the game. At least that way, OP can still enjoy one of the things that helps her feel better. But it is good that a report is going to be filed. And I would even suggest getting a restraining order for this dude. Plus, not to sound paranoid, when driving home from DM's place, OP should keep a watch behind herself to make sure that she's not being followed. That way, Bard can't figure out where she lives. So yeah, this situation is a lot more serious than the other story portrayed it to be. And here's hoping that OP will stay safe, but not let this a-hole get to her too much. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.